I used to think if I loved my son enough, poured every ounce of my heart into raising him, he'd eventually turn around and see it. Maybe even say, thank you. I clung to that hope like a lifeline, believing that love, real bone-deep love, could fix anything. But today, standing frozen in my living room with the phone trembling in my hand, I heard the truth slip out of his mouth, sharp as a slap across my face.
Finally, the old woman sent the money,
he said, his voice muffled but unmistakable through the line I hadn't hung up yet. My breath caught in my throat, and for a second I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was a joke. But then I heard her, Cassie, my daughter-in-law, giggle in the background, and Nate's scoff cut through the static.
She's too damn cautious. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get that cash.
That's when it hit me. All those years, all that love, it didn't mean a thing to him. I'd been wrong my whole life, and the realization stung worse than anything I'd ever felt. My name's Eleanor Harper. Ellie to anyone who knows me well, though these days, that list is pretty short. I'm 60 years old, living alone in a single-story house just outside Philadelphia. It's a quiet little place, tucked away on a tree-lined street where the neighbors wave but don't linger. The house is worth over $1 million now, thanks to the city creeping closer every year. I've been here since Nathan was born. Nate, my only child, raised him here all by myself after his father walked out. Back then, I was a nurse, working night shifts at the hospital, stitching up strangers while my own life unraveled at home. Now I'm retired, living off savings and the occasional odd job, with nobody but Buddy, my 12-year-old mutt, to keep me company. He's a scruffy little thing, gray around the muzzle, but his wagging tail still greets me every morning like I'm the best thing he's ever seen. Sometimes I think he's the only one who's ever really loved me back. I've always wanted Nate to grow up strong, to stand on his own 2 feet. That was my dream for him, to see him build a life he could be proud of, maybe even look back and say, "Mom, you did good." But deep down, I've been terrified of losing him. Not just to the world out there, but to the part of him I've never been able to reach. He's always had this reckless streak, a hunger for more than he could hold on to. Money slipped through his fingers like water, and I was the one running behind him with a bucket, trying to catch it all. Gambling debts, car loans, rent he couldn't pay. I bailed him out every time, tens of thousands over the years, maybe more. I told myself it was what mothers do. You don't give up on your kid, right? But standing there with the phone still warm against my ear, I couldn't shake the cold sinking into my chest. What if I'd been wrong all along? What if I'd spent my whole life chasing a ghost? It started a few days ago when Nate called me out of the blue. His voice was all honey, the way it gets when he wants something. "Mom, I've got big news," he said, and I could hear the grin through the line. "Cassie's pregnant. We're gonna be a family." My heart swelled up so fast I almost cried right then and there. A grandbaby. Something new to hold on to. Something to make all those hard years worth it. "Oh, Nate, that's wonderful," I told him, my voice soft as ever. "You're gonna be a dad." He laughed, that easy, carefree laugh I used to adore. "Yeah, Mom, I'm stepping up. But, things are tight with the apartment and all. Could you help us out? Just a little?" I didn't even hesitate. I wired him $330,000, practically everything I had left in my savings. "Take care of Cassie and the baby, okay?" I said. "Get her some good supplements. Keep her healthy." He chuckled again. "Of course, Mom. You know I will." And just like that, he was gone, cutting the call short with some excuse about being busy. I should have known better. I've seen Nate pull this kind of thing before, sweet-talking his way into my wallet, then vanishing until the next crisis. But this time felt different. A baby changes everything, doesn't it? I wanted to believe he'd finally turned a corner. So I let my guard down, handed over the money, and waited for that warm feeling of being needed to settle in. Instead, I got that call. The one I didn't mean to overhear. I'd been about to hang up when I heard Cassie's voice, bright and smug. "Finally, the old woman sent the money." And Nate's reply. God, it still echoes in my head.
"She's too damn cautious. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get that cash."
My hand shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Fake. It was all fake. No baby, no family, just a lie to bleed me dry. I stood there in the middle of my living room, the afternoon sun pouring through the curtains, and felt the world tilt under my feet. Every memory of Nate, every late-night talk, every time I patched up his messes, shattered like glass, leaving nothing but sharp edges behind. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the floor, while Buddy nudged my leg with his wet nose. He could tell something was wrong, the way dogs always do. I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands, and tried to make sense of it. Nate's always been a mess with money. Before he met Cassie, he'd show up at my door every few months, hat in hand, spinning some story about needing a couple $100 to get by. Sometimes it was thousands. Once, it was 50 grand to pay off a guy he swore would break his legs if I didn't help. I wrote the checks, sold off pieces of my life, my old car, my grandmother's jewelry, just to keep him afloat. When he married Cassie 3 years ago, I thought maybe she'd steady him. She was sharp, ambitious, the kind of woman who could whip him into shape. But the calls kept coming, fewer and farther between, sure, but always with that same desperate edge. "Mom, we're behind on rent." "Mom, the car broke down." I made excuses for him. Married life's tough, he's busy, he'll come around. I wanted so badly to believe he still cared. Now, though, I saw it clear as day. I wasn't his mother to him, not anymore. Maybe not ever. I was a bank account, a safety net, a fool who'd keep giving because that's what I'd always done. Through the phone, I could still hear them laughing, planning how to spend my money like it was some big joke. Cassie's voice floated in, all cheerful and light. "Let's get that new couch we've been eyeing. Oh, and maybe a trip somewhere nice." Nate chimed in. "Yeah, why not? She's got plenty more where that came from." The line went dead after that, but the silence roared in my ears louder than anything they'd said. I looked around my house, the worn hardwood floors, the faded photos on the mantel, Buddy's little bed in the corner, and felt like a stranger in my own life. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, it was all just a game to them. 2 days later, there was a knock at my door. I hadn't slept much since that call, just tossed and turned, replaying their words in my head. The sound startled me. Nobody comes by unannounced anymore. I rubbed my eyes, shuffled over, and opened it to find Nate standing there, Cassie right beside him. He grinned like nothing had happened, holding out a plastic bag. "Hey, Mom, had a free day, thought I'd drop by," he said, shoving the bag into my arms. "Brought you some supplements. Figured you could use a boost." Cassie flashed that perfect smile of hers, the one she'd practiced in front of a mirror. "Ellie, you have no idea how much Nate talks about you at home. He's just been so swamped with work, hasn't had the chance to visit." I looked at them, standing there like a picture-perfect couple, and almost laughed out loud. They were good, I'd give them that, committed to the act. "Well, the thought means so much," I said, patting Nate's arm. "Come on in." As soon as Nate stepped inside, he waved me toward the couch. "Mom, don't just stand there. Let's chat a little." I sat down, already bracing myself. He scratched his head, glancing at Cassie like they'd rehearsed this, then said, casual as anything. So, you know Cassie's pregnant. The apartment we're in, it's way too cramped. We were thinking maybe we could move in with you for a while. I didn't answer right away, just smiled faintly. Cassie jumped in, sighing like it pained her to admit it. It's really been hard, Ellie. The place is so tight, and now with the baby on the way, it's just not healthy for me or the little one. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. Of course you can. Nate's eyes lit up, but I saw the flicker of something else. Greed, maybe, or impatience. He hesitated, then pushed further. Well, since we're going to be living here anyway, maybe it makes sense to put the house in my name. You know, so I can handle the taxes, the maintenance stuff. Take it off your plate. Cassie leaned in, her voice all sugar. Exactly, Ellie. We're family, right? You've done enough. You should be relaxing now. I looked at them, their little duet playing out in front of me, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Once, I would have agonized over every word, bent over backwards to make Nate happy. But now I saw him for what he was. A kid who thought everything I had was his by default. Sure, I said softly. They froze, just for a second, like they couldn't believe it'd been that easy. Then Nate grinned wider, and Cassie's eyes sparkled with triumph. Great, she said. We'll get it sorted. I pressed my lips together, still smiling. Go on, I thought. Keep playing your little show. I'm curious to see just how far you think you can take it. The moment Nate and Cassie stepped through my door with their bags, I knew the air in my house would never feel the same. It's funny how quickly a place can change. Not the walls or the furniture, but the way it breathes. For 30 years, this little house outside Philadelphia had been my sanctuary. A quiet corner where I'd raised Nate and patched up my own broken pieces. Now, with their voices bouncing off the hardwood floors and their footsteps thudding upstairs, it felt like an invasion. I stood in the kitchen, watching Buddy sniff at the edge of Nate's duffel bag, his tail wagging slower than usual. Even he could sense something was off. Mom, where should I put this? Nate called out, holding up a box like he'd already claimed the place. I forced a smile. Anywhere you like, sweetheart. Make yourself at home. That's what they wanted to hear, wasn't it? And I was happy to play along, for now. They settled in fast, too fast, like they'd been plotting this move for months. By the second day, Cassie was sprawled on my couch, flipping through a magazine, her legs kicked up like she owned the cushions. She glanced over at me as I walked by with a basket of laundry, mine, not theirs, and gave me that syrupy smile I was starting to hate. Ellie, how's the house transfer coming along? She asked, her voice all soft and casual like we were just chatting about the weather. I paused, setting the basket down on the dining table. Still needs a few more days, I said, keeping my tone even. The process is a bit more complicated than I expected. Her smile tightened, just for a split second, but she recovered quick with a little laugh. That's fine. We're in no rush. We'll wait. Of course they'd wait. They had no choice. That house, with its $1 million price tag and its spot near the city, was still mine, legally at least. And until those papers were signed, they were stuck playing nice. From that moment, though, everything shifted. It was like they'd flipped a switch. Cassie started waking up earlier than I'd ever seen her move, bustling around the kitchen to make me breakfast. Pancakes one day, scrambled eggs the next, all served with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Thought you deserved a treat, Ellie, she'd say, sliding a plate in front of me. Nate, who hadn't lifted a finger since he was a teenager, suddenly took to wiping down the counters, whistling like some dutiful son out of a sitcom. Gotta keep this place looking good, right, Mom? He'd toss out, casual as anything. I'd nod, sip my coffee, and watch them perform. It was almost impressive how well they pulled it off. The doting daughter-in-law, the considerate son, picture perfect, every gesture dripping with sweetness. But I wasn't fooled. I'd raised Nate. I'd seen him charm his way out of trouble too many times to count. This wasn't love. This was a waiting game, and I was the prize they were circling. I've known Nate's tricks since he was a kid. Back then, he'd look at me with those big brown eyes and swear he'd lost his lunch money, only for me to find out later he'd spent it on candy or trading cards. By the time he hit his 20s, it wasn't lunch money anymore. It was rent, car payments, gambling debts. He'd show up at my door, head hung low, promising he'd change. "Mom, I just need a little help this one time," he'd say, and I'd cave every time. $50 turned into 500, then thousands. One year, he owed some guy 20 grand, and I sold my old Toyota to cover it. He'd hug me after, call me his lifeline, and I'd let myself believe it meant something. But he never stuck around long enough to prove it. After he married Cassie, I thought maybe he'd settled down. She was all polish and ambition, the kind of woman who'd keep him in line. Instead, she just gave him bigger ideas. And now, here they were, wiping my counters and flipping my pancakes, waiting for the moment they could cash me out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Buddy snored softly by my feet. The house was quiet, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Was I being too hard on them? Too cold? I'd spent my whole life forgiving Nate. Every lie, every broken promise. When he was 19, he smashed a lamp in a fit because I wouldn't give him cash for a night out. "You're ruining my life!" he'd screamed, and I'd just cleaned up the glass, told myself he didn't mean it. When he was 25, he threw a bowl of soup at me because I'd cut off his bank card after another gambling spree. The scalding broth blistered my arm, and he didn't even blink, just stood there yelling, "How long are you gonna torture me?" I'd knelt there, wiping up the mess, saying nothing. Was that my mistake? Loving him too much, giving him too many chances? I kept hoping he'd wake up, see how much I'd sacrificed. But maybe all I'd done was teach him he could take whatever he wanted, and I'd still be here, picking up the pieces, just as I was starting to wonder if I'd gone too far the other way, shutting my heart off completely. I heard whispers drifting from the living room. I'm not the type to eavesdrop, never have been. But something pulled me out of bed that night, some instinct I couldn't shake. I slipped my feet into my worn slippers, careful not to wake Buddy, and crept toward the door. The floor creaked under me, but their voices were too low to notice. I pressed my ear against the wood, holding my breath, and what I heard carved itself into my memory like a scar I'd never lose. "As soon as she signs over the house," Nate said, his voice cold and sharp, "we kick her out." Cassie giggled, a sound so light it made my skin crawl. "Exactly, and by then, all her inheritance should be ours anyway." Nate snorted. "Mother, she doesn't mean a damn thing to me. I've got you now. What do I need her for?" I froze, my hand still on the doorframe. A chill shot through me, straight down my spine, like someone had dumped ice water over my head. This was the boy I'd raised, the child I'd held through fevers and nightmares, the man I'd given everything to. I'd worked double shifts to pay his tuition, sold my keepsakes to clear his debts, stayed up nights praying he'd find his way. And now, in his eyes, I was nothing, just dead weight to be tossed aside. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Where had I gone wrong? Had I loved him too much, or not enough? Maybe I'd been so busy trying to save him that I'd never taught him what it meant to care. Or maybe he'd never had it in him to begin with. I slipped back to my room, shutting the door soft as a whisper, and sank onto the edge of the bed. Buddy stirred, lifting his head to look at me with those big, trusting eyes. I reached down, scratched behind his ears, and felt tears prick at the corners of mine. "You're all I've got left, aren't you?" I murmured. He thumped his tail once, like he understood. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there, letting the truth settle over me like dust. Nate and Cassie weren't here to build a life with me. They were here to take mine apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to give. And the worst part? They thought I'd let them. They thought I was too soft, too broken, too old to fight back. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Cassie in the kitchen again, humming as she poured orange juice into a glass. "Morning, Ellie," she chirped, handing it to me like a peace offering. "Sleep well?" I took the glass, meeting her eyes with a faint smile. "Well enough. You?" She shrugged, all breezy charm. "Oh, you know, the usual. This house is so cozy, though. Makes me feel right at home." Nate wandered in behind her, scratching his head and grinning. "Yeah, Mom, it's great to be back. Feels like old times." I nodded, sipping the juice slow, watching them over the rim. Old times. Sure, back when he'd treated me like a maid, expecting me to cook and clean and hand over cash whenever he snapped his fingers. They thought they had me right where they wanted me, docile, trusting, ready to sign my life away. But they didn't know me as well as they thought. I'd spent years climbing mountains with the local club, hauling first aid kits through the wilderness, learning how to survive. I wasn't the frail old lady they saw, and I wasn't about to let them walk all over me. I set the glass down, folding my hands in my lap. "So, what's the plan today?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Nate glanced at Cassie, then back at me. "Just settling in, you know. Maybe start looking at those transfer papers soon?" I tilted my head, smiling wider. "Soon," I echoed. "We'll get there." They nodded, satisfied, and went back to their little act. Cassie chattering about paint colors, Nate pretending to care about the yard. I watched them, my heart steady as a drumbeat. They thought I was the fool here, didn't they? Thought I'd hand over my house, my savings, my whole damn life without a fight. But I'd heard them last night. I knew what they were after. And now I was starting to wonder, how far did they think they could push me before I pushed back? Hey, if you've ever felt like someone you loved turned their back on you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Hit that like button if you're with me so far. And subscribe if you want to see how this all plays out. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. The sun was barely up when I woke to an empty house, or at least it felt that way. I rolled over, expecting to feel Buddy's familiar weight at the foot of my bed, his soft snores filling the quiet like they had every morning for 12 years. But the rug beside me was bare. No scruffy little mutt nudging me awake with his damp nose. A tight knot twisted in my chest. I sat up fast, throwing off the blanket, and called out, "Buddy, come here, sweetheart." My voice echoed through the room, but no patter of paws answered me. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my slippers catching the cold floor, and scanned the space. His water bowl still sat by the fridge from last night, full to the brim, but his food dish was scraped clean. He'd been here. So where was he now? I shuffled into the living room, clapping my hands softly. "Buddy, where are you?" Nothing. I checked under the couch, behind the dining table, even peeked up the stairs where Nate and Cassie were still sleeping, or pretending to. The house was too still, too hollow. My fingertips started to tingle, that creeping unease I'd felt since they moved in, blooming into something darker. I headed for the back door, stepping out into the yard. The grass sparkled with dew, the air thick with that earthy morning smell I usually loved. But today, it didn't touch me. "Buddy, come on! This isn't funny!" I called, louder now, my voice bouncing off the trees. Only birds chirped back. My hands went cold. and I clenched them into fists. He wouldn't just wander off. Not at his age, not without me. Something was wrong. I marched back inside, my heart thudding harder with every step, and found Nate and Cassie at the dining table, eating breakfast like it was any other day. Cassie dragged her fork across her plate, the screech of metal on ceramic grating against my nerves. Nate chewed on a strip of bacon, staring at his phone. I stopped in the doorway, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Nate, Cassie, have either of you seen Buddy?" Nate didn't even look up, just waved a hand like he was swatting a fly. "Oh, the dog? I took him out this morning and dumped him somewhere." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of me. A roaring filled my head, loud and hollow all at once. "You've what?" I gasped, my voice breaking, my nails digging into my palms. He finally glanced at me, chewing slow, his face blank as a stone. "It's just an old dog, Mom. Always getting in the way. Figured the house would be quieter without him." My ears rang. My stomach churned so hard I thought I might be sick right there. "You have no idea what he meant to me," I said, my voice trembling, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hold them still. He shrugged, not a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "Come on, don't make a big deal out of it. You're 60 years old. What are you doing keeping a dog around anyway? You've wasted 12 years, and who knows how much money on that mutt. I did you a favor." Cassie set her fork down, dabbing her mouth with a napkin, and chimed in, cool as anything. "Honestly, Ellie, you should be thanking Nate. He made the right call." I couldn't speak. My lips quivered. My eyes locked on them, but no words came. I turned to the coffee table, where an old photo sat in its chipped frame. Me on the couch, holding a 1-year-old Buddy in my arms, smiling like the world was mine. That dog had been my shadow, my comfort, the one thing that never asked for anything but a scratch behind the ears. When Nate stopped coming around after the wedding, when the calls dried up, Buddy was there, curled up beside me, his warmth chasing off the loneliness. He wasn't just a pet. He was my family, the only piece of it that still felt real. And now, they'd taken him, tossed him out like trash, without even blinking. The morning sun streamed through the windows, bright and mocking, but I'd never felt so cold. It was like my heart had cracked open and fallen into a pit I couldn't climb out of. I walked away from the table, my legs heavy, and shut myself in my room. Nate and Cassie didn't say a word, just went back to their breakfast like nothing had happened. I sank onto the bed, staring at the empty spot where Buddy's blanket used to be, and let the tears come. They burned hot down my cheeks, silent at first, then choking sobs I couldn't hold back. "Buddy, if you're out there, I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I should have protected you." Protected? I pictured him alone somewhere, confused, his old legs trembling, waiting for me to find him. The thought tore me apart. I'd failed him, just like I'd failed myself all these years, pouring love into people who'd never give it back. That's when it hit me. The real turning point. I'd spent my life bending over backwards for Nate, believing if I gave enough, he'd see me. When he was a kid, I'd stay up nights stitching his torn jackets because he'd rather fight than talk. When he was 20, I worked extra shifts to pay off his gambling debts. Tens of thousands racked up before I even knew what hit me. He'd kneel at my feet, sobbing, "Mom, save me. I'll never do it again." And I'd believe him. Too easily. I'd lock his accounts, ground him, try to pull him back. But he'd snap, slam doors, shout things that shook me. "Let me go or something bad'll happen." And that time with the soup, he threw it, burning my arm. "How long will you keep punishing me?" He spat, towering over me as I cleaned up, skin stinging. I never stopped trying. I kept loving him, hoping I could fix it. But Buddy never hurt me. Buddy never asked for more than I could give, and losing him was the final straw. I wiped my eyes, my breath steadying as a strange calm washed over me. I'd been playing their game, Nate and Cassie's little charade, letting them think I was the same old Ellie, soft and pliable, ready to hand over my house, my life, my everything. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Not after this. They'd crossed a line I didn't even know I'd drawn, and something inside me snapped awake. I wasn't just a mother who'd lost her son. I was a woman who'd lost enough, and if they wanted to keep pushing, I'd push back. Smarter, quieter, harder than they'd ever expect. I'd climbed mountains, patched up hikers in the wild, carried packs heavier than my grief. I wasn't weak. I wasn't done, and they had no idea who they were dealing with. I stood up, smoothing my shirt, and glanced at the mirror across the room. My face was puffy, my eyes red, but there was a fire there I hadn't seen in years. If they want to play this game, I muttered to myself, I'll be the one writing the rules. I didn't know exactly what I'd do yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Nate and Cassie thought they were in control, pulling the strings while I danced along. They were wrong. This was my house, my life, my fight, and I was done letting them win. I opened the door, stepped back into the hallway, and took a deep breath. The air felt different now, charged, alive. They'd taken Buddy from me, but they wouldn't take anything else, not if I had anything to say about it. Miamwai, the days after Buddy disappeared blurred into a strange kind of limbo. I moved through the house like a ghost, cooking meals I didn't eat, folding laundry I didn't wear, all while Nate and Cassie settled in deeper. They didn't even pretend to care about what they'd done. Not a word about Buddy, not a flicker of remorse. Instead, they got bolder. Cassie started barking orders like she was the lady of the manor. Ellie, bring me some water, she'd snap, slamming her hand on the table one afternoon. I'd fetch it, forcing a tight smile, and she'd take one sip before spitting it out, splashing me in the process. Are you trying to burn me alive? Me and the baby? She'd hiss, even though we all knew there was no baby. I'd murmur, sorry, I'll get you another, and she'd wave me off like I was some clumsy servant. Forget it. Go grocery shopping, make something decent for dinner. Nate just lounged on the couch, smirking like he was watching a show he'd paid for. I played along, nodding, grabbing the bags, stepping out the door. But every time I crossed that threshold, something hardened inside me. I'd drive to the store, pick out ingredients, creamy potatoes, rich cheeses, salty meats, and build a plan in my head. Not some petty revenge, nothing obvious like dumping salt in their coffee. No, I'd serve them comfort food, the kind they loved, loaded with fat and sodium, so indulgent they'd never suspect a thing. That night, I laid out a spread, macaroni and cheese dripping with butter, mashed potatoes thick with cream, a pumpkin soup so rich it coated the spoon. Nate shoveled it in, grinning between bites. Mom, your cooking's better than ever. Cassie sipped the soup, her eyes half closed in satisfaction. Looks like keeping you around was a smart move. I pushed more toward them, my voice soft. Eat up. You both look like you've lost a little weight. They didn't see the trap, not the fog that'd creep into their heads, not the weight that'd slow them down. And I kept cooking, day after day, watching them gorge themselves while I stayed calm, waiting. But just when I thought I had everything under control, something knocked me off course. I was tidying the living room one morning, dusting around Nate's mess, when my eyes drifted to his laptop, left open on the couch. He must have forgotten to close it, the screen still glowing. I wasn't trying to snoop, honest, I wasn't. but the words caught me like a hook in the gut. How to take out a high-value life insurance policy for an elderly family member. Below that, common methods of going missing without suspicion. And then, how to reassign a trust fund beneficiary after death. My blood turned to ice. I only read a few lines before my hands started shaking, a chill racing down my spine. This wasn't just about the house anymore. They weren't waiting for me to hand over my life. They were planning to take it, dollar by dollar, until I was gone. That accidental glance might have just saved me. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and drove straight to the insurance office downtown. Sitting at the reception desk, I kept my voice steady, though my insides were churning. "Hi, I'd like to check if anyone's taken out a policy under my name." The clerk typed for a moment, then nodded, pulling up a file. "Yes, Miss Harper, there's a high-value policy registered to you. Premium tier, one of our most expensive plans." He handed me the paperwork, and I took it with trembling fingers. The numbers stared back at me, millions, with Nate listed as the beneficiary. I didn't need more proof. To them, I wasn't a mother, a person, a life. I was a payout, a target with a price tag. I thanked the clerk, folded the papers into my purse, and walked out into the crisp air, my mind racing. They weren't just greedy, they were dangerous, and I'd been sleeping under the same roof as them. When I got home, they were sprawled on the couch, waiting like nothing had changed. Nate stood up, flashing that fake warmth he'd perfected. "Hey, Mom, you must be exhausted from running around. Let me take your bag." I kept my face blank, handing it over. "What's all this about?" I asked, sitting down slow. He scratched his head, all casual. "We were thinking maybe we could take you out tomorrow. A hike in the national forest. Get some fresh air, change of scenery." Cassie slid in beside me, her hand resting on my back, her voice dripping with crocodile tears. "I've been so moody lately, snapping at you for no reason. I'm sorry, Ellie. Thought it might be nice to reset, spend some peaceful time together." I almost laughed out loud. If I hadn't seen that laptop, I might have bought it. Their little act of contrition, the family outing. But I knew what they were planning. A remote forest, treacherous trails, cliffs where people went missing every year. They'd picked the perfect spot to make it look like an accident. I smiled, nodding. "Sure, sounds nice. I'll go." They blinked, stunned for a second by how easy I'd made it. Cassie recovered first, ushering me toward my room with a grin. "Great, then you better start packing. We're leaving early." I didn't argue. I went to my room, locked the door behind me, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty backpack in the corner. My hands curled into fists, slow and deliberate. They thought they had me cornered, didn't they? Thought I'd walk right into their trap, frail and clueless. But they didn't know I'd been planning too, long before they ever typed those searches. I'd found their stash of sedatives a few days ago, tucked in a drawer they thought I'd never check. I'd slipped a little out, kept it hidden, waiting for the right moment. And now I had it. The next morning, we set off after breakfast. I sat in the passenger seat of Nate's car, watching the city fade into barren hills as we drove towards Sable Ridge, a state park on the outskirts, known for its winding trails and deadly drops. I'd heard the stories, hikers lost, bodies never found. Nate knew it too. That's why he'd chosen it. I stayed quiet, my heart oddly calm, almost heavy with purpose. We pulled up near the base of the mountain, and I stepped out, the sharp chill biting at my skin. Cassie looped her arm through mine, all cheerful. "Ellie, what are you spacing out for? Come on, don't kill the mood." I gave her a warm smile. "Of course. We're here to relax, aren't we?" We started up the steep trail, climbing higher as the sun burned the sky crimson. When we stopped near a scenic overlook, just steps from the summit,
Nate waved me toward a rock. "Mom, sit down, take a breather." He dug into his backpack, handed me a bottle. "Electrolyte drink, thought it might help you recharge." I took it with a nod, raised it to my lips, and pretended to sip, letting a little dribble down my chin. I didn't swallow a drop. As I lowered it, I caught their quick glance, smug, satisfied, perfect. I pulled 2 energy bars from my bag, holding them out. "You two should eat something too. It's been a long climb." They grabbed them fast, tearing into the wrappers without a second thought, too eager to notice the faint tear marks I'd hidden. I sat there, pretending to rest, then let my body slump to the ground, limp as a rag doll. Cassie laughed, delighted. "She actually drank it. That was way too easy." Nate's voice followed, colder than I'd ever heard. "Sorry, Mom, but I really need that insurance money." I felt them drag me toward the edge, probably aiming for a drop-off where no one find me. I counted in my head, 5, 4, 3, and then 2 heavy thuds hit the dirt behind me. I opened my eyes, stood up slow, brushing off my clothes. They lay sprawled on the ground, out cold. You see, I'd never touched their little concoction. The real trick was in those bars, laced with their own sedatives, the ones I'd taken from their stash. I'd just given them back what they'd meant for me. Trying to trap me? You're far too naive, I said, my voice low, cutting through the stillness. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and started down the mountain. Night was falling fast, the temperature dropping, wild animals prowling the trails. If they didn't wake up soon, well, that'd be their lesson. Let them taste survival for once. I hummed to myself, step by step, my heart lighter than it'd been in years. They thought I was the prey here, but I'd been ready to flip this game upside down. I made it down the mountain just as the last light faded from the sky, my boots crunching against the gravel at the trailhead. The air was sharp, biting at my lungs, but I felt alive, really alive for the first time in years. I'd left Nate and Cassie up there, sprawled in the dirt, their own medicine knocking them out cold. Part of me wondered if they'd make it back before the wolves started howling, but I didn't linger on it. They'd wanted to play a game of survival, and I'd given them a fair shot. As I brushed the dust off my hands, a faint cry cut through the dusk, weak, broken, calling for help. I turned toward the sound, pushing through the brush until I found him. A man about my age, crumpled in the undergrowth. His leg twisted at a bad angle. His face was pale, eyes glassy with pain. "Can you call for help?" he rasped. I didn't hesitate. I dialed emergency services, stayed by his side until the ambulance roared up, lights flashing. At the hospital, he gripped my hand, voice soft but firm. "Thank you. I'm Leonard Graham, Executive Director of Graham Group. You saved my life." My heart skipped. Graham Group, the very firm Nate's company had been chasing for months, begging for investment. Fate's got a funny way of tying knots, doesn't it? I didn't mention the connection, just smiled. I was there. Doing the right thing doesn't always need a reward. He insisted anyway. "If you ever need anything, just ask." I nodded, tucked his card in my pocket, and left it at that. A quiet twist of luck I'd keep to myself. That night, I slept deeper than I had in decades, the weight of everything sliding off me like water. When I woke, sunlight spilled across my pillow, warm and gentle. The clock read 10. I grabbed my phone, dialed with a shaky, breathless edge I didn't have to fake. "Hello, please. You have to help me. My son and daughter-in-law went hiking at Sable Ridge yesterday. They haven't come back. I'm so worried. Please find them." The operator's voice sharpened. Ma'am, stay calm. We're sending a search team now.
5 hours later, the call came.
We found them.
I took my time getting to the hospital, stepping into their room to find Nate and Cassie lying there, pale and ragged, like a pair of drowned cats dragged out of a river. Nate turned his head, weak.
Mom, where did you go?
I blinked, all innocent.
I'm not sure. I just remember waking up in a hospital room.
I rolled up my pant leg, showing a neat bandage on my ankle.
Doctor said it was a mild sprain.
Cassie gasped, her breath still shallow.
We passed out all of a sudden. It doesn't make sense. Did you?
I cut her off, feigning hurt.
What are you saying? Why would I ever do something like that? I love you both. I've been sick with worry.
Nate frowned like he was trying to piece it together, but he gave up, mumbling,
"Forget it,"
and flopped back against the pillow. They bought it, or at least they couldn't prove otherwise. During their stay, Cassie went right back to her old self.
"I'm craving lobster today," she'd demand. "Tomorrow, I want abalone soup. Gotta nourish my body."
Once, I'd have gently nudged her towards something lighter. Now, I just smiled, nodded, and cooked it all. Rich, heavy, every bite a little more baggage for her system. Nate recovered enough to head back to work, swaggering out the door like he still owned the world. But when he got there, security stopped him cold.
"System's correct. You've been removed,"
the guard said. He messaged his bosses, frantic, only to get a curt reply.
"Your position's terminated."
He came home in a daze, collapsing onto the couch, eyes hollow. I glanced over, casual.
"Rough day?"
His fists clenched, and he snapped.
"Am I really that worthless? Why would they fire me?"
I patted his head, gentle as ever. "Don't be so discouraged. I've got money. I'll take care of you both. Why don't I send you on a vacation? Clear your heads." He hesitated, then nodded.
"Yeah, maybe that'd be good."
Cassie perked up. "A vacation sounds perfect. We deserve it." I booked them a week in Thailand, my final gift. They didn't know I'd already started unraveling their lives back home. While they were gone, I hired movers, packed up every scrap they owned, clothes, junk, all of it, and donated it to the community center. Anything valuable went to charity. I changed the locks, wiped the house clean of their scent. When they landed, I sent them an invoice. Every dollar they'd blown on that trip, charged to Nate's credit line, pushed past the limit just like he always did. His call came fast, voice shaking with rage.
"What the hell is this? What are these bills?"
I stayed calm.
"The money you spent, Nate, it's yours to repay."
He sputtered.
"I'm your son. Isn't it normal for me to use your money?"
I chuckled, soft and cold.
"Really?
Tell me, aside from when you needed cash, have you ever looked me in the eyes and said, 'I love you, Mom'?" I hung up. An hour later, the doorbell pounded.
"Mom, open up!"
Nate yelled. Cassie shrieked.
"What kind of mother does this?"
I opened the door just enough to block them, standing firm as Nate tried to shove past.
"This isn't your house,"
I said, his eyes blazed.
"What do you mean? You gave it to us."
I tossed a folder at him.
"Take a look."
He flipped it open, face paling as he read. Cassie snatched it, trembling.
"It still says your name. You tricked us."
I raised an eyebrow.
"You were too busy celebrating to read the fine print. That paper you signed? A non-binding intent form, for display only."
Nate shoved me, hard.
"I'm your son. How could you?"
I steadied myself, pulled an envelope from the drawer.
"You're not my son."
His color drained as I handed it over.
"Paternity test. Your real mother was the woman who wrecked my marriage. She had you, then vanished."
I took you in, raised you, gave you everything. And what did I get back? He sank to the floor, muttering, "No, you're lying." I crouched down, met his eyes. "I've done more than enough. Pay what you owe and get out." I turned to Cassie. "Oh, and that drink on the mountain? I never touched it. You two took your own medicine. I just returned it." I slammed the door, their sobs echoing outside. They collapsed on the step, undone by years of my cooking and their own greed catching up. I called 911, watched the ambulance take them away. Later, the doctor said they'd never fully recover. Weakness would shadow them now. I smiled faintly. "That's no concern of mine," Leonard called that afternoon. "Where are you? I'm picking you up." His voice softened the ache I'd carried too long. He pulled up outside the hospital, calm and steady, and I slid into his car. "Long time no see," I said, smiling. "Too long," he replied. "Time we take each other seriously." I didn't answer, just let the quiet settle between us. He'd known me years ago from the mountaineering club, a steady presence I'd forgotten until fate brought him back. Now he was here, not loud or pushy, just solid. We started small, book clubs, pottery classes, morning walks. I redecorated the house, planted an herb garden, mint, rosemary, lavender, watching it thrive as I did. One day, a package arrived. Graham Group files, Nate's name erased from every line. Leonard never mentioned it, just brewed me coffee and smiled. Happiness crept in, quiet as his hand brushing mine. I'd spent 60 years loving others, thinking it'd come back to me. It didn't. But now, I've learned, real love starts with yourself. What about you? What's your story? Thanks for listening to mine. Hit like if it resonated, subscribe for more, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Check out my next video, and I'll see you soon. Take care.